Press Corps, and welcome sa ating press briefing ngayon, June 27. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. led the sectoral meeting this morning, which focused on the establishment of the National Natural Resource Geospatial Database. This is a mapping tool that would be used to help identify areas for reforestation, watershed management, and mining policies, among others. To give us more details on this, we have with us the Department of Environment and Natural Resources Secretary, Maria Antonia Yulo-Loyzaga. Good morning, Secretary Loyzaga.
Good morning, Daphne. So this morning, we were asked to present a new office at the DENR called the National Natural Resource Geospatial Database Office, or the GDO. That office was organized after our first meeting with the President after our appointment, where we suggested to him that it would be essential to manage our natural resources through establishing a physical baseline kung ano po ang nandiyan in terms of our natural resources, in order for them to be accounted for, to be valued properly, and to be managed properly. So, yung geospatial database po ay gumagamit ng mga satellite imagery and other tools to process kung ano po ang nandiyan. For example, nasaan po ang river basins natin? What is the flow of those river basins? Kung tutuusin, malakas ba or mahina ang flow through the river basins and the watersheds that they host, ang forest natin, ilan ba talaga ang nako-cover in terms of ang classified forest lands po natin ay 15 million hectares. Ang nakikita po natin sa satellite imagery, mga 7 million lang ang actually with forest cover. So what this will do for us is it will allow us to identify saan ba ang priority in terms of forestation, reforestation, afforestation, or where should be the water systems and infrastructure na dapat po ilagay natin in order to reach the most populations in need. So aside po sa forests and water, we're looking also at land management. May mga foreshore lease ba dyan na hindi na ginagamit for the purpose na they were established for? Pwede ba yan gamitin sa ibang purpose, for example? And of course, our mineral resources na dati nang minamapa. Pero ngayon po, we're looking at the situation of the mineral resources given certain other data. For example, may mga protected areas ba within the mineral resources or vice versa. So these are just some of the few products that we are trying to produce sa GDO. And sa ngayon po, it is a very small office. We were able to establish it without any additional budget by just making use of the resources na nandiyan na po inside the DNR for that fiscal year. And we're looking, of course, to build more capacity to actually acquire the satellite imageries that we need and the kind of processing software that we need in order to continue the work. So, ayon po.
Thank you for the update. Are there any questions from the press? Eden Santos, Net 25.
Hello, good morning po, Secretary. Paano po makatutulong itong bagong tanggapan at dun yung mga kailangan po nating equipment para naman kaagad makapaghanda ang ating pamahalaan, hindi lang sa panahong ito under the administration po, even yung mga susunod na administration, para po mapigilan yung mas matinding epekto ng iba't ibang disaster or gaya rin po ng climate change, mga ganyan po.
Thank you very much for for that question, So, ang nagagawa po ng office na ito is really to establish, for example, yung forest cover natin. May different purpose po ang forest cover natin, not just to give shade, For example, forests actually protect the sources of our water, So, kung wala pong forest, yung watersheds po natin hindi na makakapigil ng water para makalabas in areas where, in fact, they will be most useful. So, yung rivers and streams po natin, iiba po yung flow. So in terms of forests, we look at forest cover that actually helps us sa climate change mitigation, number one, sa pag-sequester ng carbon dioxide sa atmosphere, that's one value. Secondly, what it does for flood management and soil erosion control. There are also community-based livelihoods na nandiyan po in terms of the way we manage our forests. So there is a social and economic component as well na kaiba dun sa actual standing forest natin. So in terms of the ability of this office to detect kung nandiyan ba yan or hindi, that's the principal value of this office. By using certain software, we can also anticipate how much carbon, for example, ang pwedeng ma-sequester given the species na nandiyan sa different forest cover. So, in terms of climate change and disasters, talaga po yung forests are kailangan po. In terms of water, ang gawin po natin ngayon is kung walang tubig, huhukay po tayo ng isang deep well para makalabas yung tubig para magamit po natin. So what we're doing ngayon po, because there was a DOST project, nagsimula pa po in 2017, no, that mapped all the actual surface water sources sa buong bansa. We're able now to see kung saan po dapat kumuha ng tubig na hindi po huhukayin sa deep well, no. Also, we're also able to see saan ba ang may local water utilities administration, the governance aspect, no? Saan ba na bigyan na ng water rights ang mga ibang parties so that we can also match the supply with the demand side governance. What that also allows us to do is, given climate change projections, meron po tayong mga climate physicists dito sa Pilipinas that will say, yung rainfall change po natin ay ganito. Magiging mas maulan dito versus, so for example, in the northern and central areas versus southeastern Mindanao. Mas maulan po ang mangyayari dyan in the next coming few years sa north. Dito naman sa baba, sa may Mindanao, medyo mas tutuyo, no? Didecrease po yung rainfall. What we're able to do now is design our infrastructure angkop dun sa rainfall change na ina-anticipate ng mga scientists.
Yung mga impounding po.
Opo. So we can also design multiple purpose sa infrastructure na yon. Impounding system pero may irrigation function, meron din hydropower potential, no? And of course, the potential for domestic and industrial use.
Secretary, isa na lang pong follow-up. Kanina nabanggit nyo 15 million hectares ng ating forest land ang sinasabi.
Classified forest po natin.
Classified. Pero 7 million lang pala talaga.
Ang may cover. Opo. So what we're also tracking is saan ba talaga ang nawawalan ng forest? Saan ba nagdadagdag? No? So we're able to do that. Ngayon po, ang capacity ng office na ito, we can actually monitor monthly kung ano po yung kaiba. No, it's called change detection. Meron tayong capacity to do that. But what's more important is ang potential for the reforestation and afforestation of certain areas na talaga pong nakalbo na, pero classified as forest. And therefore, we can actually make use of that in terms of climate change mitigation, at disaster risk reduction din, of course.
Ma'am, patunay po ba yon yung 15 million hectares na forest land na nawawala na dahil 7 million na lang ng kapabayaan ng ating mga mamamayan ba yan, LGUs, or ng ating government mismo, kung bakit itong mga forest land na ito ay biglang naubos o nawala?
Wala po sa mandato ng DENR magsabi niyan kasi po governance issue 'yon, no? Governance issue. So what we're able to do is just advise, no? Dito po mas nakakalbo yung mga areas and therefore dapat po may investment po dito in terms of reforestation, no? Dito po ay grassland na or dito wala na talagang grabland na, no? So sana po dito rin mag-i-invest yung mga ibang LGUs, also private sector, no? So meron tayo ngayon, of course, isang tinatawag na carbon credits market, no? Ayan po is also based on how much carbon you can sequester from the atmosphere. So, marami pong mga parties ngayon, including governments, including private sector, including LGUs, na tinitignan po yung potential for the economic value, no, ng establishing the forest or re-establishing the forest. Kasi po, nabebenta po yan, may economic value siya, globally. Kasi meron po mga bansa, for example, na sobra talaga yung emissions nila, kailangan nilang i-offset dun sa kung saan may actual sequestration na nangyayari. Dito po sa atin, medyo malakas po because we still have the 7 million, but kung tutuusin, kung ma-forest po natin ang lahat ng 15 million, ang Pilipinas po has a great possibility combining the land-based lang ho yung 15. Meron pa tayong mangrove forest, meron pa tayong seagrass. We have the great potential of being a real sink, ang tinatawag pong sink, no? Hindi po tayo net emitter, but eventually we can actually have the capacity to absorb other areas emissions, no?
Okay. Before we go on, I just want to reiterate what the president had said at the meeting. He said that this tool and this office that Secretary Loyzaga had presented to you strengthens the monitoring and enforcement of our existing laws already. So it will be of benefit to various government agencies and departments, which I'm sure you would like to. Would you like to talk about the all of government
Sure.
approach and how you're going
Surely.
to coordinate everyone?
Yeah. So yung environmental management and natural resource management is really whole of government approach, no? So this will make use of our natural capital, ang tinatawag natin natural capital, in order to add value to the investments of the other departments. For example, meron po kaming, for example, ngayon, isang convergence initiative, no po, with DPWH, with DILG, sa governance, with NEDA, with LUWA, pati po yung MWSS kasama na po. Ang nagawa po ng DPWH is inibita po nila kami at yung mga ibang departments to join them in the implementation of nationally funded local water projects. So, ang role po ng DENR doon using this tool is to identify the best surface water source doon po sa mga projects na yon. There's over 1,000 projects po na nationally funded pero local ang pag-implement. And so what we're trying to do po is kinakausap po namin, of course, ang mga LGUs through the DILG na sana po ang pag-implement is hindi na po yung deep well. Dito na po sa surface water source. So we add value po dito sa investment ng national government in terms of providing water at the barangay scale, no? So we also are working, for example, with the DOF, dito po sa valuing our minerals resources and with NEDA, as well as, of course, the rest of our natural capital, no? In terms of establishing what they call the natural capital accounting system. Yung natural capital accounting system po ay napakahalaga because in terms of wealth of a country, dati-dati po, ang mga physical na binavalue lang ang basically yung mga infrastructure, yung mga assets in terms of financial, no? Instruments, etc. Pero ngayon po, there is a move globally to take stock of yung natural resources ng isang bansa at actually to consider that as what they call natural capital na pwede pong mag-generate the both economic and of course financial benefits and eventually of course the social benefit of having that actual compensation or income from the use of the natural resources.
Okay. Right. We have Alexis Romero, Philippine Star.
Secretary, may we know the reforestation target of the Marcos administration? Are we going to finish the entire 15 million before the end of this administration or just part of it?
Realistically speaking po, we cannot complete the 15 million in terms of reforestation. What we're doing po ngayon is we have prioritized the first million in terms of verifying kung saan po talaga ang pangangailangan. So the first million is there, although we are looking at 2 million hectares that we would like, of course, to reforest once again. Alam nyo po, meron tayong dating programa called the National Greening Program. May mga sites po tayo na nag-graduate na po sa programang iyon. Those sites need to be maintained and need to be sustained in order for us not to lose further the cover that they actually prevented. And sana po ma-enhance pa. So in terms of our own targets at DNR, we want to do 2 million hectares as a priority. Ang 1 million na po yan have been mapped adequately and we can actually already show these to local decision makers as well as private sector, community-based forestry and management groups to say dito pa sana ang priority natin.
So 15 million so far, we have 7 million forest covers. So pagkatapos po ng Marcos admin, so mga 8 pa po yung natitira more or less. So mga ilan po kaya yung malalagyan ng forest cover by 2028?
You asked me a very difficult question to predict. Kasi po ang determining factor po doon, kung sino po ang mag-step forward in terms of the partnership with the DNR. And here's where we also have stated in the past, no. Ang DNR po ay hindi yung pinakamalaking budget sa buong gobyerno, no. We are just number siguro 12 po kami in terms of budgets, and we're very grateful na this year parang madadagdagan po yan, no. We need partnerships, and the only way we're going to be able to implement the reforestation at a pace na siguro ina-anticipate ng lahat, no, is to build the partnerships in those areas na priority siya. So ang 1 million is the modest target for our being able to actually get partnerships to move forward. 2 million is our reach, no, it's our reach. But sana po umabot sa 10 at least in terms of the overall na 15 by the end. No?
Salamat po, Sec.
Thank you po.
Jinky Baticados. I'm sorry, Jinky.
It's okay, ma'am. Secretary, just one question po. We do understand that GDO is new office under DNR. What's your marching order po kung sino man ang mag-head doon?
Right now po, we have had to establish it with a leader. Our head of the GDO is our undersecretary na bago rin po for integrated environmental science. And that is because cross-cutting po ang value na ginagawa ng GDO. And yung head po ng office ngayon is si Yusek Carlos Primo David.
Job Manahan, ABS-CBN.
Hello po, Secretary. Good morning po. Ma'am, speaking of yung budget kanina, magkano po yung budget na allotted dito sa new office na ito?
Actually,
papasok po ba ito for next year, sa 2024?
Opo, we're asking for a certain allocation. Sana po, hindi ko pa sasabihin kasi under negotiation. Pero previously po, in the year that has passed, no, from its establishment sa January of 2023, we were able to actually use internal budget. So, hindi po kami humingi sa iba. We have about 10 staff ngayon. Halos lahat po yan ay entry-level contract of service. So, if you can imagine po, ang salary grade po nila ay hindi po masyadong mataas. Pero ang value related to their service, of course, is multiples of that. Ang head po is an undersecretary level salary. We were able to use existing computer assets. So, wala pong additional talaga ang hiningi for this year, 2023 po.
Pero ma'am, baka pwede i-reveal kung magkano siya? Or kahit estimate lang, ma'am?
I'll get back to you with that one, siguro. Because, i-clear ko muna sa finance. But really, it's really just providing for salaries sa 10 staff na yon. Ang USEC po ay multiple assignments, so hindi fair na ilo-load po yan sa isang office lamang. So, essentially, 10 people lang at the entry-level salary grade. Ang iba po ay talagang assets na meron ng DNR computers, no. Malaking bagay po ang interface namin sa Philippine Space Agency. Ang pinaka, I think, mahal, no, in terms of yung ginagamit is the use of the satellite imagery, kung paano siya i-procure. But because we have a Philippine Space Agency, nagagamit po namin yung anong meron sila, di ba? So, at this point, walang extra outlay ang GDO. Basically, tao lang ang budget.
Maricel Halili, TV5.
Sec, magandang umaga po. Sec, follow-up lang po dun sa na-mention ninyo kanina na 1 million hectares na priority or 2 million. Of course, kino-consider kung sino yung mag-step forward. But basically, how will you choose kung anong areas yung priority? What are the factors to be considered?
Yes. essentially graduated sites that have already been graduated from the National Greening Program. There are also NGP sites that have actually not been quite successful in generating the forest cover that had been planned. So we'd like to prioritize those areas first. Actually, kalat-kalat po sila all over the country. Meron pong allotment all over the country, no? So we're looking at, of course, sa Region 2, sana, and of course, certain areas po sa Mindanao. No? Thank you po.
Okay, Katrina Domingo, ABS-CBN. It's across.
I think Mari was raising her hand.
Secretary, on another environmental topic, may we know the status of the Environment Compliance Certificate of the Parex?
Oh, okay. We are currently looking into what has already been issued. I'll make a statement on that very soon, possibly next week. No.
May we know the salient points, at least initially? What did you find out about it? Is the DENR leaning to approve it or disapprove the program?
We're not at that point, Katrina. No. So what we're trying to do is evaluate this issue called the cumulative impact. No, and this is the same. This is the same approach that we're taking on the various ECCs that have been given in areas where there are multiple projects that are in a single ecosystem.
Last question: what is the time frame for this for the issuance of the ECC?
There is no time frame. The investigation is ongoing in terms of the cumulative impact. No? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Maurice Umali, GMA 7.
Hi, good morning, Secretary. Ma'am, can you just enlighten us a little bit more on the acquisition of the satellite imagery? First of all, how many do we have right now, and how many more do we need in order to really achieve the things that we want to achieve using these new technology?
Well, there are two things, no, Maris, here. There's establishing the baseline for which we have to get a cut-off date, no, as of X, no. And then there's what we call the need to detect changes. So that's a recurring demand for updated satellite imagery. One of the applications really here very recently is a user case. No, we're monitoring certain developments on the ground in a time series so we can detect whether compliance was actually achieved by those that are doing the work on the ground. So what I'd like to drive home is that it's a continuing demand. If you're doing change detection, especially on forestry, no, you have to do it periodically in order to know whether nadadagdagan ba or may nangyayaring iba, no, sa mga areas na ito. Fortunately, we do have the Philippine Space Agency. Dr. Joel Marciano was there. We work very closely with him. And he has arrangements with different satellite imagery providers and processors. And so we tap into the resource of the space agency.
So, ma'am, would this be able to really identify and detect the most vulnerable communities? And if such, will this also help in at least transferring them to other areas for their own safety? Paano po kapag hindi sila pumayag, anong mangyayari?
Yes. So what we are using the satellite imagery for is mapping natural resources. No? So the physical features. The governance aspect really is part of our collaboration in terms of the whole of government and actually whole of society approach, no, to this work. There needs to be integration in terms of implementation of certain policies, some of which would be policies of the DILG, for example, or DSUD. No, and your question regarding housing and the vulnerable populations. When you actually acquire satellite imagery, yung parang pang-Google na alam natin, di ba? The optical images will tell you who is and what is there, who and what, no? And so what is incumbent upon the decision makers is to really make use of that information as part of what we call decision support system. What we do is not decision making in terms of, it's decision support.
Recommendatory.
Decision support. So basically, we're going to say, oh, by the way, there is erosion in this river. We see it. and there might be a community in line of that erosion. So what we do is we talk to the LGU or we talk through the DILG to actually pinpoint kung ano po yung kailangan gawin sana.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Last question is Nestor Corrales, Philippine Daily Inquirer.
Secretary, just on another equally important environmental issue, what is the President's position on Manila Bay reclamation, since several groups have urged the President to unconditionally revoke all environmental compliance certificate for Manila Bay reclamation? And there's a statement previously from the Philippine Reclamation Authority that there are 22 reclamation activities in Manila Bay.
Well, right now, what I have been given some latitude to do is to actually present a cumulative impact assessment of the different individual projects. Ang nangyari po kasi in the past, ang evaluation po ng mga projects na ito have been on an individual basis. Globally po ang practice, whenever you have several projects in a single ecosystem, you need a cumulative impact assessment. And so we are undertaking that. Alam niyo po, there is a Manila Bay Sustainable Development Master Plan that was also contracted during the previous administration. We are actually using the baseline of that Manila Bay Sustainable Development Master Plan and taking that baseline, comparing it with the technical descriptions of all the different reclamation projects in Manila Bay. Just to add to that question in terms of a complication layer, the DNR is also, of course, one of the mandamus agencies, no, in the decision by the Supreme Court to actually rehabilitate the bay. What we are concerned about is our task in terms of implementing that mandamus, okay, is actually going to be impeded by some of these developments. And so, for example, may mga STP na po that have been set up, as you know, in order to treat the water that flows back into the bay. Saan po ilalagay ang mga future STPs at ano po mangyayari sa mga STPs na nandiyan na in terms of the effluent pathways na in-establish prior to the approval of any of these projects. So, as you can understand it, may mga tubo po yan, ilalabas nila yung treated water. Kung meron po nakaharang, medyo may problema po tayo. So, we have a mandamus that we need to implement. That's by law already, by the decision of the Supreme Court. And we need to also now actually evaluate the cumulative impact of all of those projects together.
As of now, Secretary, wala pa namang pinatitigil ang DNR na reclamation activity sa Manila Bay?
We are looking at compliance for those that have already begun working, no? And also calling them in. So kinakausap po namin ngayon ang mga nag-umpisa na.
May mga nakita po bang violations ang DNR?
There are discussions ongoing with at least one party.
May we know...
We are, since bago lang ang release ng information, they will be called in for a technical conference to see whether may explanation po sila sa mga inobserved na potential, no, non-compliance.
If okay lang, Secretary, kung ano po yung naging violation nila, kaya po sila pinatawag?
Iba-iba po. And so, may mga issues, for example, na related to mga conditions na on the basis of which the no objection was given by other departments and agencies. So, there are conditions that need to be complied with in order for the no objection to actually take effect. So, yung mga condition po na yan, naka-identify po yan in the ECC. And so, we're looking at each one of those specific conditions and seeing whether nag-comply na po ba sila. And so, yun. No.
Okay. It's a developing story.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Malacañang Press Corps, and thank you, Secretary Loyzaga. Have a good afternoon, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank
Morning
you.
pala.